This video is brought to you by Honeygain. Stick around to hear more about their passive income application. Alright, over a year ago, I produced a video titled The Coronavirus Conspiracy Theory. That video, for starters, got immediately demonetized and a warning placed beneath it from the CDC, despite every single thing I said being factual information, and the few times I speculated from a personal position being very clearly labeled, but much more importantly, that video discussed the topic of a Wuhan Institute of Virology leak conspiracy that might serve as a possible origin story for the virus. That theory was a work in progress. Wuhan contains a BSL-4 virology lab. That lab has been actively working on coronavirus variants during the time of the outbreak, and there was a multitude of other factors involved, such as the more insane theory that the logo for this lab was somehow identical to the Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil, the movie franchise. That was debunked in the video. It's a skincare clinic or something like that, and the logo had actually been changed even before that. But the point is, there was an emerging theory that this virus might have somehow escaped from a laboratory rather than being produced naturally in the wildlife ecosystem. Here's where things get much more intense. This theory was met with extreme animosity by the media. I won't dive into every single instance because, in truth, there are far too many to even count, but once the theory had made its way to the pinnacles of conservative government, Tom Cotton being a prominent Republican who latched onto this idea and pressed for an investigation over the period of several months, and when even the president at the time, Donald Trump, mentioned his opinions on this being possible, even more likely than not, the media went into overdrive. I'm not trying to make a huge statement with this part, but there was a very strong indication that the merits of this theory at that time went right out the window. Media engines were not interested in agreeing with the president at all. They had no interest in that. Even worse, most of the mainstream media machine was not only disinterested in agreement, they were adamantly opposed to even the slightest possibility that the president might be correct on something, which transformed what should have been an impartial, apolitical topic into a charged partisan line for and against misinformation. Social media eventually joined the fray as well. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. Online publications, TV news, you name it, everything. The common battle cry rapidly synchronized into a claim that experts have debunked the lab theory. Anyone who pushes it should be deplatformed, shut down, or relegated to the fringes of society where they belong. They are science deniers. They are the other. They are harmful. Now, that's not new in America. We have a pretty alarming tendency to polarize topics in a way that sows division and unrest more than anything else. Think of Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. Despite the grammar of those phrases, the literal grammar being in actual agreement, if all lives matter, so too would Black lives, these words have become opposing political taglines that are now used as a sort of Rorschach test, if you will. All Lives Matter is often viewed as a response to Black Lives Matter, which it fundamentally kind of is, and some say it is an attempt to diminish the potency and validity of the original movement. Therefore, anyone who says it will most likely be judged by an opposing group rather viciously, and vice versa. Regardless of where you fall individually on that particular topic, it's undeniable, absolutely undeniable, that America has an issue with political polarization, and the coronavirus, namely its origin theory specifically, was not immune to that. When the theory gained traction, the opposition grew, and eventually, after months of degradation and censorship, those that firmly believed in the lab leak theory were largely silent or contained to individual forums and communities. Those communities were often being obliterated by social media ban waves or Reddit purges, which would make them increasingly vocal for short bursts of time, but largely speaking, there was a successful endeavor to quell the theory from mainstream consciousness. Well, much more recently, that's been kind of falling apart. It turns out that 3 researchers from the Wuhan Institute of Virology went to the hospital in the lead up to the COVID-19 pandemic with COVID-like symptoms, while the lab specifically studied coronavirus variant types. The specifics of this, such as how much money was funneled into this very research from US medical groups or gain-of-function study and what role that actually played in all of it, are above and beyond the scope of this particular video, but we should expect further information on those topics in the coming months. Before going further, I've been getting demonetized more and more lately, so it's time for today's sponsor, Honeygain. So what is Honeygain? Short answer, it's an app that allows for your internet connection to be used to collect small bits of data online. The biggest applications are price comparisons. The prices in your geographic region might be far different than somewhere else, search engine optimization and visibility metrics, as well as advertising verification or brand safety. It's pretty simple. Sign up, install the app using the link down below on whatever devices you want. It works for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and Android currently. It is not available on iPhones at this time. And let the app gather small bits of info using your internet connection. It does not access your private data, merely the analytics generated through its own searches, which utilize your internet link. This means that you can leave the app running to passively generate income. There's a referral program, and you can easily earn enough money to cover Netflix subscriptions, Spotify, etc., etc. It's not going to replace a full-time job. Reasonable expectations here are the key, but it is passive income that will increase based on how many devices you have. You can use the upper echelon promo code, UEG, or click the link down below to sign up and start earning on all your devices. Big thank you to Honeygain for sponsoring the channel. So why does all this matter? Well, the best example would probably be Vox, though in truth there are dozens of different examples, hundreds actually, to choose from, which outline exactly why this polarization of reporting and scientific process needs to be completely reworked. On the 12th of March 2020, Vox posted an article titled, "The Conspiracy Theories About the Origins of the Coronavirus Debunked. There's a rumor the coronavirus started in a Chinese lab, and evidence from scientists to the contrary." End quote. Now, this, of course, was not accurate. What started as a claim about cross-species jumps from bats to humans became bats to snakes to humans, I believe, became bats to pangolins to humans, and I won't dive into the deeper chain of reporting that was warped and twisted with time, other than to say that it was clear through every single step that the underlying premise was the lab leak is impossible. It didn't happen. This was a natural occurrence. China said so. All of you who say otherwise should be branded as conspiracy theorists spreading misinformation. You are harmful. Well, that's just one example in a sea of possibilities. Drew Holden, a freelance journalist, posted a thread on Twitter compiling some of the more obvious ones, which include complete reversals from the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, a lot by CNN actually, way to go guys, Politico, Reuters, NPR, The Hill, the BBC, Business Insider, and Fortune. Those are just the ones he documented in that particular thread, but there were more. MSNBC, ABC News, NBC, CBS, Bloomberg, Forbes, and innumerable industry professionals in the space all condemned the theory that a Wuhan virology lab, studying the very same viral strains that became a global pandemic at that time, hinging on early transmission from a wet market that was barely a few kilometers away from the lab itself, saying it was totally impossible. Now, I should be completely accurate here that the lab leak theory is not synonymous with a bioweapon theory. That's a dishonest media tactic often used to discredit both of them. It could easily be the case that the virus was being studied in a lab and got out. That has happened before, without being engineered by that lab as some sort of viral agent. Example.
This matters. Understanding where a coronavirus and how the pandemic began matters. A lot of the discussion about the lab leak, I think, was clouded early on because there was the suggestion by some that it was somehow a Chinese weapon that caused this. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a lab accident. But we've come a long way from people dismissing this as a conspiracy theory to a lot of people taking this seriously, Maggie.
CNN were the ones dismissing it the hardest. It is not required that you believe or accept these two things in tandem, but what has become abundantly clear is that many of the most prominent voices in media, at least during 2020 in particular, decided to link these theories in a way that implicitly required you to acknowledge that if one might be true, so must the other. That is not accurate, that isn't what I'm saying here, and please don't nuke my channel out of existence, YouTube. In February of 2017, the US intelligence community was actively warning that dangerous pathogens might escape from the Wuhan lab. As written by Nature, the International Weekly Journal of Science, quote, "But worries surround the Chinese lab too. The SARS virus has escaped from high-level containment facilities in Beijing multiple times," notes Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist at Rutgers University in Piscataway, New Jersey. Tim Trevan, founder of Chrome Biosafety and Biosecurity Consulting in Damascus, Maryland, says that an open culture is important to keeping BSL-4 labs safe, and he questions how easy this will be in China, where society emphasizes hierarchy. Diversity of viewpoint, flat structures where everyone feels free to speak up, and openness of information are important, he says. End quote. Understanding that a scientific sentiment already existed viewing Wuhan to be a high-risk laboratory, understanding that a track record was established indicating that similar pathogens have escaped multiple times from high-level containment facilities in Beijing, that the viral outbreak manifested just a few kilometers away from the lab itself, while the study was being conducted on nearly identical strains of the same viral family. How on earth did we arrive at a near total media consensus that anyone who speculated on the lab leak theory was dangerous and conspiratorial, spreading misinformation, and should be deplatformed or silenced? That is the question I keep asking myself, because that is the question that led to mass deplatforming, mass demonetization, most importantly, and social media ban waves. Widespread fact checks that are now fully called into question, almost all of them, and a renewed interest in speculative theories that were never actually debunked ever, and also never proven, but instead simply branded immediately as wrongthink and obliterated at every possible turn. Bottom line, conspiracy itself is not intrinsically wrong and should not be ignored or discredited on principle or merely as a gut reaction. Scientific process is fluid and should be iterated upon at every potential opportunity, and media should not be politicizing the origins of a viral outbreak simply because they disagree with the figurehead, or figureheads plural, who happen to voice that concern. Over-politicizing important topics could very well be the greatest issue of our time, not so much because that by itself is the root cause of social problems, but because that process completely inhibits our ability to rationally and, most importantly, effectively deal with problems. If someone hates my channel and despises my content, it might be easiest for them to instinctively discredit everything I say as awful and always wrong, because it is exceedingly uncomfortable for them to agree with me, or even entertain the possibility that I might be correct. Now imagine if entire multi-billion-dollar media behemoths, not just individuals who don't like the content of a YouTuber, are doing the exact same thing with a global pandemic origin story. They hate the party that most vocally discussed the issue, or at least in the most high-profile way. They hate the man that stated these concerns with too much vitriol and inflammatory rhetoric. I'll acknowledge that. He could have phrased it better on every single occasion. So they condemn the theory itself, and anyone who discusses it as harmful, wrong, xenophobic, race, every single pejorative term that they can think of, and most importantly, conspiratorial. This dampens discourse, hinders discussion, and should not be forgotten because this latest instance is one of the most egregious things I've seen in a very long time. That's it. If you want support, check out the links down below, primarily Odyssey. I don't get demonetized over there. Also Locals, $5 a month to support the channel. Honeygain, use the code, another YouTuber to check out, merch, social media, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.